morning, beautiful quilters. So in my last video, I showed how I made this quilt top using a layer cake called Sunshine and Blue Skies. And I thought this just turned out gorgeous. I used a free pattern called Double Slice, and it uses an entire layer cake. And so it assumes for this pattern that you have 42 coordinating pre-cut 10-inch squares. But what do you do if you don't have 42 pre-cut squares? Either your layer cake doesn't have 42, or you don't want to use every print. Sometimes you get a layer cake and there's one or two prints that you're like not wild about that you want to leave out. So today we're going to talk about how to make that pattern work if you don't have 42 coordinating squares where you love every print. Okay, so I have these two 10-inch stackers. These are from the brand Singer, and this one's called Daisies and Gnomes, and it has yellows and blues, has bumblebees and little gnomes. It's super cute. This one is their pink green spring, and it's what it says. It has green, pink flowers, little daisies, very just cheerful fabrics. But these only have 20 squares in them, so you need to get up to 42. So I had these different solids, and so I went ahead this morning and I've already ironed and cut some 10-inch squares. To cut your own 10-inch squares, iron the fabric you desire to use, and we're gonna cut it every 10 inches going one direction. Then we're gonna turn the strips and subcut them every 10 inches the other way. I had just some yardage left over. I wasn't sure exactly how many squares I was gonna be able to get, but I was able to get about 20 10-inch squares out of this yellow, green, and blue fabric. And my thought was, oh, hi baby. You wanna say hi to the camera? Say hi to this snowflake. She's my little baby. Okay. I was thinking about using this lighter blue with this because there's a softer blue kind of around these gnomes. So mixing this in. And I was curious too, the layer cake I used didn't have any solids or really any that even like red solid, except for maybe some of the navy blue ones. And so I was curious, how would this pattern look if you mixed in some actual like solid prints, you know, solid fabrics? So that's my plan today, is to do that pattern again, but this time using the 20-inch stackers plus solids that I cut myself. I think this might also give you an idea of, if you're cutting your own 10-inch squares from your stash, how you might make this pattern work. Okay, I'm gonna use this brighter green and blue with this one, and I'm gonna use this kind of golden yellow and this lighter green and lighter blue with this one. And so we're gonna just see how this works. I don't really have any preconceived notions of how this is gonna work. I'm curious what adding solids in will look like. Okay, so the cutting is gonna be the exact same as what I showed in the last video. I don't really need the spinning cutting mat for this, but this cutting mat on the bottom is getting a little old. This one has a better cutting surface. So our first cut is at the 3.5-inch line. We're gonna go through all of our 10-inch squares and cut them on the 3.5-inch line so that we will have a 3.5-inch by 10-inch piece and a 6.5-inch by 10-inch piece. And this is the first slice of the double slice pattern. Nicely, and cutting at that 3.5-inch line. So now I'm gonna start cutting these prints. I think these gnomes are just adorable. It's gnomes and bumblebees. And then there's some other blue prints, and it's yellows, blues, browns. I guess I just love yellow and blue anyway. I really do. I've made several yellow and blue quilts. They're just really cheerful colors to me. Okay, now these I will flip over. Okay. Hello, Astro. So my two cats, I have Astro is my golden cat, and he's the one that's playing around behind me right now. That's Astro. And then Snowflake is my gray kitten with the little white on her nose. So it looked like a little snowflake landed on her face. Hello, baby. So I'm glad I'm mixing solids in because I've had this stacker for a while, and a lot of layer cake patterns tell you to use 42 squares. Well, I didn't know what to do with this stacker because it was only 20, and so I knew I was gonna have to add something to it or work it into some pattern, and so I think this is gonna end up working out really well. So this is the last one right here, is just to cut this one. And then I'll be able to actually start sewing. Okay, so this next step is fairly simple. You're gonna have your two stacks of fabric. One of them is gonna be 6.5 inches by 10 inches, and one of them is 3.5 inches by 10 inches. You're just going to flip one stack over. This is so that it now is mixing up what you have. So now when I pick from each stack, I've got one solid and one print. And so basically, I think as we go through this, it should mix everything up really well and kind of disperse the solids into the prints. Ooh, I don't have my 1/4 inch foot on. This is my, is a different, I was doing something else earlier. Let me switch it back to my 1/4 inch foot. My kittens are going nuts. They love this sunny window. So if you see cats going nuts behind me, it's because they love the sunny window. It's their favorite. I'm gonna take a little back stitch. Okay, and so you just do this throughout the whole stack. You're gonna pick up, remember we started where it's like this. We flip one side over, and then when you pick up one from either pile and sew them together, there's no seams to match. You're just gonna make a straight stitch along one side. I have my machine set on 2.5, and I'm using a 1/4 inch foot, and I'm using just some light gray Aurifil thread because it'll blend with anything. Right now, essentially, I'm just gonna chain piece. I'm gonna sit here and just do these until I get through the entire stack. So even here, we've got, these are 2 yellows, but I know that's gonna happen throughout the quilt. It is a lighter yellow and a darker yellow, and the lighter yellow has some white on it, so. I think the key to this quilt is not overthinking it, but literally just going through the stacks. If you've, you know, cut all your fabric and not worrying too much about what goes next to each other, because you should have already picked fabrics that coordinate, or you used an entire layer cake and everything for sure coordinates. And see, now we already have another option here, because now I've got this yellow next to these little happy bumblebees and little white daisies, and it's going next to the yellow, which I think is going to look really nice. Okay, I'm going to continue sewing through this whole stack, then y'all can join back with me and I'll show you how we're going to iron and cut them for the second part. Okay. So I have finished sewing I finished sewing the first 2 steps together. So that first cut we made. So now I have all of this ready to iron. I'm gonna grab my little, this actually you put old rotary cutter blades in. And so when you have all of this chain piecing, where's my first end? Okay, so you can start, I'll put it on the table, and you just to nip them apart. It makes it really easy. And so all of these have now been stitched together. I'm gonna iron them, and then we're gonna make the next set of cuts. I'm gonna iron them open towards the smaller piece. And then once I iron them, we're gonna cut them again. That'll be the second slice. The pattern's called double slice. The first slice is at 3.5 inches, and then the second slice is gonna be at 5 inches. Double slice layer cake. This is the best part about chain piecing, is that you can do so much so fast because you don't have to worry too much about what it is that you have going on. Okay. I think all these colors go together nicely. It kind of just reminds me of like a garden or something with all the blues, greens, yellows, and well, and there's also a lot of flower prints in it and the little garden gnomes. That's probably why it's making me think of a garden. Okay, so that is all done. So now I'm just gonna start ironing this. Okay, so when I iron, I'm just gonna go ahead and iron along the seam first. I put it so that the small piece is towards me. And then once I iron to the seam, I'm gonna open it. I'm gonna kind of just fold it back with my fingers to make sure there's not a ridge there. And then I just iron from the large side to the small side, and that's it. So now all the seams are going towards the small side. In some quilting patterns, it has very specific pressing instructions because you're gonna have to nest or match seams. They'll tell you to press the seams open. This one, when we go to put the blocks together, you don't have to match seams. So it's fine to just press it. You can press it to either side you want. And if you press some of them one way and some of them a different way, it does not matter. There's no nesting of seams. So it makes it really quick and easy. So I'm just gonna go through this stack, and they're all gonna be pressed the exact same way. Okay, so now that I have all of these ironed, from step one, I counted. I actually ended up with 40, not 42, because I had originally 20 in my pre-cut 10-inch stacker, and then I had 20 squares that I cut that were a mix of prints. And so, my cats are rolling this around the floor. So I ended up with 40 squares. So when I do my layout later, I have basically two options. I could make it into a square and do 6 by 6, or I could make it into a rectangle and do 5 by 8. So I'll have to play around with the layout later. Staggering the seams is helpful so that you don't end up having to cut through a lot of bulk. So when I lay these out to cut through them, I like to lay them out and keep the edges lined up, but then stagger it so that this seam is spread out, and it'll make it easier to cut through a whole bunch of them at one time. I can probably fit one more on here. Okay. Okay, so now we are just going to cut this basically in half. These are 10 inches wide, and we are going to cut them on the 5-inch line. We're essentially just cutting these in half. But the cut is going to go across the seam that we made earlier. We don't want to cut it in half this way. We want to cut it in half this way, because later we're going to rotate one of these stacks and we're going to sew it back together, and that's what makes the block. Okay, so for right now, I'm going to keep them the way that they were, and all I'm going to do is turn them over in front of me and keep going until I have all of them there. Okay, so you're just going to continue on until you finish cutting through all 40 of these. Okay, so now that we've done the double slice, we've cut these in half on the 5-inch line, I'm again gonna flip one pile over. And this didn't have as many prints as my last one. So sometimes there may still be two that are the same, but what's interesting here is that I have the yellow is my bigger piece and my blue is my bigger piece on this one. But anyway, you put a small rectangle at the top and a small rectangle at the bottom, and then we're gonna sew this together with a 1/4 inch seam, and we're gonna go through this whole stack. And that's the block, the quilt block. It's, that's it. And then when you put it all together, it creates a nice patchwork. Okay, so pick up my next piece, and as I pick them up like this, they should be ready to just put together. And if I open it up to check it, I've got a small rectangle and a small rectangle. So this should be good. Okay. This is the perfect kind of sewing to just put on an audiobook and just chain piece. I just completed sewing step 2. From start to finish, this has only taken me, I don't know, not that long. It's only noon here. I'm dressed in my scrubs because I'm about to go do my home health job, and I'm already almost finished with this quilt top, so pretty fast. I'm gonna cut these apart and iron a few blocks and kind of just lay a few out to show you how this is gonna look. That's not always where we end up. Okay, I've got my whole stack cut apart right here. I'm gonna iron these open, and let's see how some of these blocks are looking. Okay, I'm just gonna stick this stack right here so I can pull them towards me and then iron them. Oh yeah. Okay, so I think it's looking pretty good. Okay, so that's the blocks with some solids mixed in. Now, I didn't have quite as much variety of prints, so there's definitely gonna be some blocks like this where you have almost like an L shape, because I've got the same print as the small piece on this one and the big piece on this one. And so actually did not plan this at all, but the pattern actually matched up really well from one side to the other, the little zigzaggy stripes. I didn't even match that on purpose. I just matched up the top of my block and that came out perfectly. So that's a happy accident. Okay, so here you can see my layout with some solids mixed in with the prints. And I think it turned out very bright and springy and cheerful. Thank you for joining me today. If you liked this video, please hit the like and subscribe button, and happy quilting.